morning. My name is Lindsay Varner. I'm the Community Outreach Director here at Cumberland County Historical Society, and I'm also the Heart and Soul Project Director, which started about 2.5 years ago now, thanks to a grant from the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. And one of the things that we had done over the past 2.5 years was talk to an awful lot of people in the greater Carlisle area. We collected a little over 1,000 stories. And as part of the project, we started to listen to what people were saying in their relationship with their municipalities, particularly in Greater Carlisle. But we saw an opportunity to start talking to both municipal officials and staff and communities and how we can start getting everybody engaging a little bit better. So our leadership team for the project, along with the Humanities Council, came up with the idea for this panel discussion today. And as we can see from our panelists, it seems to be a topic that's fairly popular at the moment. So we thought this would be a good way to sort of start the conversation and hopefully keep it going and have many more conversations after this. So I'm not going to talk for too long because Pam and Laurie are both going to talk quite a bit about the Heart and Soul project that's going on, along with some of the other initiatives that are happening across the county and state. So I'm going to hand it over to Keith Chase, who's going to be our moderator for today.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. The microphone's working, good. And you will see some green sheets in front of your table. I'll explain those in a moment or two, because we are going to have a conversation about a topic that is so important that we've really lost sight as to what the value of planning is, because we've been so caught up in process and reports and shelf sitters that we really forget what's planning about. So my first question for you, just fill in the blank, and I have a feeling that you will participate even though no one is in the front table. That's called the front pew phenomenon. No one is at that table, yet this is actually symbolic of one of the problems with planning, that a lot of people won't step up and lead change. So I want that to be a little pictorial symbol for you going forward. Planning is, go ahead and fill in the blank. Anybody jump in. Planning is. One-word answers are fine.
Or it's a process.
A process, yes?
Organization.
Organization? Planning is. Keep it going.
Tough.
Tough, yes.
Preparation.
Preparation?
Seldom done.
Seldom done. Others. Planning is?
Communication.
Communication. Pamela's planning is?
Preparing for the future.
Oh, I love that. Preparing for the future. Any others? I was going to offer a little bit on the negative side, but intended to be constructive. Planning is tired. And, you know, planning is actually neutral. It's kind of odd when planning gets a bad rap. It's like giving food a bad rap. I could eat a highly nutritious meal, and it's good for my well-being, it's good for my future, and I could eat junk that I'm prone to do, and it will contribute to ill health. And we really need to turn this around, because planning is actually one of the words I didn't hear, because we've lowered our expectations, is planning is essential. There was something along those lines. So you may have been pretty close on that, but planning is essential. So today we're going to actually have a conversation about that, and we'll do something with the result of it. So a lot of planning has become tired, it's become too conventional. The good news is the timing is great to change this. Pennsylvania communities must do something about their future. All of them, communities that are healthy, communities that are distressed, they must not just do business as usual, they must do planning that's results-oriented, performance-based, outcome-oriented, engaging their residents, engaging their business, engaging stakeholders, building partners. So there is this paradox that while planning is essential in a neutral term, somewhere on the scale of 0 to 10, planning resides. A 10 would be transformative. Some communities really need to engage in planning and implementing those plans, executing them for transformation, for change. On the other end, the 0, if you think about these two ends of the spectrum, 0 is over here, and that's a waste of time, and 10 is transformative. Our discussion today is aimed at how do we move the needle to planning being transformative, value-adding, impacting, creating the kind of futures we want. And as we drill down, the focus today is on engaging residents, engaging business. And that's where planners, and I self-indict myself and many others, that's where we've often failed. The plan has often been about the planner. That's a mistake. If you ever engage in a planning process, and ultimately it's called the Baker Plan or the Gannett Fleming Plan or whatever, you have failed. It's really the community that must have ownership for it. So the question becomes, what's really entailed in getting to that planning as a 10? And I think it's a function of ownership, that ultimately the community has a high degree of ownership for what they have planned, what the community has planned. Not the planners, but the community. The planners really set the table and facilitate the planning process. So where does ownership come from? Ownership comes from engagement and identification. The people believe the plan is theirs. So I want you to think along those lines today. These presentations are not real long. There's going to be plenty of time for discussion as well. The timing is just outstanding. Even some of the work we do with PennDOT, the present PennDOT secretary is putting a tremendous emphasis on transportation begins with the community and with community planning. And that's just one indication. That's just one indicator. But as for many of you as parents or grandparents, you know the kind of communities you want for your children and for your grandchildren to be those that you create. And by the way, a little aside, one thing we need to do is in all of our planning is get youth and young adults more involved, because it's really about their future. We're even stuck in the mode of having people my age and older doing all the planning, and we got to get out of that as well. So you have in front of you a green sheet, and I ask you to write on the left side of that, and this is for the panel members as well. Think of this as a large whiteboard, a large dry erase board. And on the left side, challenges. And on the right side, solutions. And throughout the morning, I want you to begin now, identify what are the challenges. Challenges to what? Challenges to effectively engaging the community in the planning process. And when I first heard of Heart and Soul, Lindsay, part of working on the Historic Preservation Plan and meeting, I thought this is it. Somebody's actually working at bringing some soul back into a very soulless, heartless discipline. So heart and soul is just such a great label for something that's so needed. We need to breathe life back in the planet. Challenges on one side, solutions on the other. And we want your input on that today. You're going to have a chance to discuss that with the panel, and they with you. They may identify their own challenges. Pam's already doing so. And they may throw those challenges out to you and ask you what the solutions are, and vice versa. So we're going to have a 360-degree conversation about challenges in terms of how do we really change this planning paradigm to involve and engage community at every level, employers, residents, young people, and what are the challenges in doing that, recognizing somebody said it is tough. Planning is tough. What are some of the solutions? So think of that as your dry erase board for the day. And also think about the color green, that today we're planting something. We're starting something new, a conversation here that can really sprout, and really a lot of good things can come from it. I plan to personally use some of the results of what I hear later today in terms of some discussions I'm having with community leaders. So that gives you a little basic background. And I think what we've opted to do is to have the presentations and then have the discussion. So you be real busy with your challenges and solutions. And when we're done with the panel, we're going to have some fun processing that. I'm going to start by introducing Deputy Secretary Rick Vilello, and he joined DCD in March of 2015 as Executive Director of the Center for Local Government Services. In that capacity, Rick also directed the efforts of the Tax Equalization Division and the Resources Recovery Team. Prior to DCED, Rick served as 4 terms of Mayor of Lock Haven and was previously the President of the Pennsylvania Municipal League. Keeping with the theme of heart and soul, I had the opportunity to work with this fine gentleman last year, and he has a lot of heart, he has a lot of soul, he cares about what he does, he cares about getting the real results. Would you give a real nice Carlisle welcome to Rick this morning?
It is a real pleasure for me to be here today because this is a topic that is close to my heart. Like he said, I was mayor of Lock Haven for 4 terms. Actually had to leave in my 4th term to go to DCD. So I was mayor for 15 years, 3 months, 2 days, and 20 hours. And it was probably the coolest job I'll ever have, even cooler than this, because you had a direct impact on the community. One of the things I do at almost every opportunity I have to speak, the mayor before me, when I won the election, came to my election night party and pointed his finger in my face and said the best thing you could do is get an unlisted phone number. I didn't hold him in very high regard, so every opportunity since that day, almost 20 years ago now, I give out my cell number. I believe that as a public servant that we should be here to help solve problems. I want to be a resource for you. So if you want, you can put my cell number down, 570-263-0578, 570-263-0578. And our role at DCD is to help you, to help solve problems, to move communities forward. And when I saw the opportunity today and, breaking the complaint cycle, when you're mayor, you hear 1 or 2 complaints, and, changing attitudes changes communities. Think about the places that are declining. People can't wait to leave. People can't wait to get out. First one house becomes vacant on a block. Then another house becomes vacant on a block. Or all the children can't wait to move out. And it's like cancer, it spreads throughout the community. And then think the other way, think of when somebody paints their house or plants flowers. Pretty soon, the neighbor's wife is saying, hey, we have to paint our house. We have to plant flowers. It's contagious. So when you can change attitudes, you can change the cycle in a community. And when I first became mayor, when I first ran for council, we ran against the Good Old Boy Network. Lock Haven had a couple big challenges. Piper Aircraft left in the 80s. Hammermill International Paper was declining. There was a huge fight over flood protection and building the levee system. There was a huge fight over school consolidation. And council had spent so much political capital in all of those fights that they became known for saying no. The local editorial, if they knew somebody was going to council or saw on the agenda that somebody was proposing a new idea, the newspaper would write an editorial before the meeting saying, I don't know why such and such group is wasting their time, council's going to say no. So I was much younger and dumber, and a group of us ran against the Good Old Boy Network, and we won. And we started to change things in the first 2 years. One of the very first things we did was we said we need a new vision for what Lock Haven's going to look like. And I thought it was going to be a quick process. It ended up being a long planning process. And we had meetings all around the community, almost in every church basement, at parks. I mean, we were meeting to death. And it was, through that long process that this document was developed. And it's titled Community Connections, New Vision for the New Century, the Master Plan for Downtown Lock Haven. And while that was going on and I was on council, we had started a summer concert series, we had started streetscapes, we had started some other stuff. But one of the council people that we beat, one of the Good Old Boys, said the new guys were ruining his town. and he announced real early that he was going to run for mayor. And he had been on council 28 years before this, and his father was a doctor that delivered all the babies in town. And he didn't like that we were changing things. Well, I tried to convince everybody else in Lock Haven to run for mayor, and everybody said no because Mr. Oberman was so mean. Well, my wife said, looks like you're gonna have to run for mayor. And I did. And on election day, Lock Haven has 5 wards. 5 former mayors worked all 5 wards all day long against me. And I won by 28%. We were ready for change. We were ready to go to the next step. You know, people were tired of council saying no. You know, there's books out getting the yes, and the people were sick and tired of having ideas shot down. And I had a bunch of ideas when I started and thought in the first 6 months I could change the world. And 16 years later, there were still things on that 6-month list that I didn't get done. But what this book did, which I didn't realize at the time, it laid out a roadmap to beat the ones that were saying no. You know, if it was in the book, you know, the editorial was different. If it was in the book, you know, the public perception was different. Hey, they're following a plan. You know, one of the things I did that wasn't in the plan was raise parking rates from 1 cent to 5 cents. Boy, did I get beat up about that. But if it was in the plan, the conversation was completely different. You know, because you could point to something, and it was a process that the community was engaged in. You know, we didn't have any opposition when we did the streetscapes. We didn't have any opposition when, you know, we were working with downtown Lock Haven on events that people said they wanted to do as part of the planning process. So while I was frustrated that this took 2 years to get, it dramatically changed how successful I was as a mayor. You know, it was a part-time job, it paid $37.50 a week, but I could point to something and say, we need to do that next. And there was already a built-in support system. And so going through this, you know, we had all of the issues. We had to, you know, build a new sewage treatment plant because of DEP and other things. But, you know, during the whole course, you know, we were knocking projects off one at a time and building on our prior success. And I announced that I was only going to do 2 terms, and 2 terms became 3 terms, and 3 terms became 4. Because of having to get the sewage treatment plant done. But I announced at the beginning of my 4th term that I wasn't going to run for a 5th term. And that's when I met Governor Wolf and helped him in his election. And the governor asked me to go to DCD. And it was the perfect place for me to land. I tell people my time as mayor was the best internship ever for what I get to do now. And having a plan is so important for what you are doing. You know, think about economic development. Economic development is random, it's haphazard. You almost have to get lucky to land a new business. Community development is what we all do. It greases the slides for economic development. It is a marriage. If, you know, you went home today or got a call today that tonight you were going to have company, the first thing you would do is run the vacuum cleaner and clean the living room and, you know, make sure stuff was put away. That's community development. You know, the things we do at home is the same things we do in our community. So when we know company is coming, we, you know, make sure the flowers look good, we pick up the garbage, make sure everything's put away. And you don't know what that's going to lead to. Think about the number of CEOs that you can picture out of the Fortune 500. There's probably 4 or 5 that I showed you a picture, you would know who they are. The other 495 could be in Carlisle today and we wouldn't know it. So what kind of impression would we make to encourage that economic development? Would they stay? Would they walk around? Would they get out of their car? If they picked up the newspaper, would they, read good things about what's going on in Carlisle? If you ran into somebody in one of the restaurants and they had questions about the community, and they said, is there anything to do? When the answer be, there's nothing to do here? What impression are you leaving? And with heart and soul, how can the heart and soul plan lead you to where you want to be? How can it be your roadmap to success? How day in and day out are you going to refer to it? It's really important, to be on the same page. Everybody in this room, the elected officials, the county commissioners. It's a long process. It's not a 6-month process. It's not a 16-year process. It's what do we want to look like in 2035, in 2040? What's next for Carlisle? So I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Rick. You framed things very nicely. And before I turn to our next speaker, I do notice there's still some green space. So I thought by the time I stood up that I wouldn't see any green, that there's so many challenges and so many solutions in your fertile minds early. So I'm expecting each time I stand up, I'll be seeing less and less green. You mentioned attitudes, and that's very important. And as I make brief comments between the speakers, I might say something that prompts some of your thinking on challenges and solutions. Attitude is so important, and a saying that I wish I could take credit for, but I'm going to share it with you this morning, I think does apply. And that is attitude. You can write this out like a mathematical formula. Aptitude plus attitude equals what? Any guesses? Altitude. Aptitude plus attitude equals altitude. Our skills, what we know, the abilities of people we may not even know and are leveraging, right? Plus our attitude, how we embrace the challenges really becomes how high we soar or not. Excellent in the way you frame that. Thank you, Rick, very much. And thanks for talking a little bit about the Good Old Boys Network. Good old boys sometimes could be good old girls as well. And it's the idea of being entrenched and being stuck in the past or stuck in the present when there's communities all around the United States that are stuck in the future and they're doing something about the future today. Laurie, we are thrilled to have you here today. And I hope I pronounce your last name correctly. Is it Zierer?
You got it.
Laurie Zierer. And I'm going to read her little bio sketch verbatim. And we are thrilled that you're here. And first of all, thank you for what you're doing. You are really addressing a need, a gap. And so keep up the good work. And so you're going to get lots of handshakes and pats on the back on the way out here today, as will others. Laurie Zierer is Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. In recent years, she has led the Council to strategically sharpen its focus on civic engagement and education. My, do we need those things. Areas of need in Pennsylvania where the humanities can make the greatest impact. With the community partners in the city of Chester, Laurie launched the Chester Made Initiative to recognize and promote arts and culture and to harness their power as a force for community revitalization. Also under her leadership in 2015, PHC partnered with the Orton Family Foundation to bring Orton's Community Heart and Soul Framework to Pennsylvania towns and small cities, which I say good for you. Well done. Laurie holds a BA in English from Temple University and a Master's of Arts in Rhetoric from Penn State. We can be sure she's going to be an excellent communicator. She serves on the board of New Century Trust, a National Historic Landmark in Philadelphia, devoted to improving the lives of women and girls through grants and education. We are thrilled you're here, and I'd ask you to welcome Laurie.
I'm sure many of you are wondering what the humanities have to do with planning and community and economic development. Raise your hand if you're wondering what the humanities have to do with all this. Oh my goodness. Well, let me talk about that a little bit to address that, and then I'll talk about some of the heart and soul communities that we've been working with. For us, the humanities are all about culture. And I'm going to take a strong position, and that's what we've done at the Humanities Council, to say that planning can't be successful unless we deal with culture, unless we deal with and talk about who we are as a people in Pennsylvania. It's really all about us. We have to first ask ourselves, what do we value? What makes a place like Carlisle, Carlisle? How do you know you're home when you're home? These are important questions, and they're part of the planning process. I'm from a small town, Holgersburg, county seat, Blair County. Only a couple thousand, and I can tell you, from the start, I always knew it wasn't all about me, it was about we. And I brought that perspective to my work, if it be going to Penn State to study rhetoric, and I studied storytelling, or the work that we do at the Humanities Council. How do you break the complaint cycle to get to the topic? It's through the humanities. It's through culture and talking about what we value. Originally, the word culture, it came from the Latin. It means to care, and from the French, to till the soil. And I think that gets us back to that. It's all about that sense of place, that spirit, that ethos of what we know, and those patterns of behavior that are instilled in us. And they come through in the way that we see things, and in our attitudes, and in the laws that we make, even to govern ourselves. It's this culture, it's this humanities that bring us together. And we get to talk about what makes us tick. It's about us. They allow us to talk about where we differ and what we all care about too. They create a sense of place and purpose. And what I think is most important is that they create this incredible positive force in heart and soul. It's like a tsunami as each story is collected and honored. That's what breaks a complaint cycle. Also, what's the magic sauce of the humanities? It's really that civic spirit. That when everybody gets involved. I think that Rick talked about, people are tired of complaining. People want real change. They want to be involved, and this just harnesses that. People want to make the changes, and they want to do it in their own terms. So as a statewide organization, we saw that we could make a difference, a real difference. And so we began work to do some resident engagement. And as Keith said, we started this in Chester. Now, how many people have been to Chester or know about Chester? The usual headlines are not about a positive force about people coming together. What you see in the headlines and the perceptions about Chester are about crime, violence, poverty. And so what did we find? We brought together a number of what may seem like uncommon partners, artists, Widener University, community leaders, the city together to rebuild the community and engage people in making change, rather than waiting. And how did we start to do this? We knew about the power of stories. We brought people together. We had a team that went out and collected stories from kids, senior centers, you name it. We were collecting stories, and we used them to plot out the future. We asked people to get on the map, and we created a cultural asset map. It was our first foray into this kind of work, and we did it hand in hand with the planning department. In doing this kind of work, we knew that we could really make a difference, and we needed a great partner. And we partnered with the Orton Family Foundation and their Heart and Soul Method. what we did in Chester, we're still in Chester, and on the basis of all those stories, we're doing all kinds of programs that continue to engage the community. But to do this to scale across Pennsylvania, we needed a partner like Heart and Soul. You know, it's a process that's been around for more than 15 years, tried and true. And what it really does is it's a 4-phase process. New leaders and volunteers are activated, values are identified, and then communities begin to change the way they do business. They take risks and explore new ideas. So what I'm going to do, I know Pam's going to talk about what's been happening in Carlisle. Let me just say a few words about what's been happening in Williamsport and Meadville. So in both cases, you know, storytelling has been central to the work. And they really identify the spirit of the place. In Meadville, I know here that there's almost 1,000 stories. In Meadville, there's 1,400 stories. Whoops. And they're collected in the community, in all kinds of different places. In Williamsport, there were about 1,300 stories collected. We like to, so many people call stories data points. We see them as data with soul. And once the stories are collected and analyzed, values are identified, people begin to come together to identify, you know, what is the spirit of the community. In Meadville, they are currently planning a potluck. They want to break the Guinness World Record for the largest potluck on July 27th. So if you're going to be near Meadville, please put this date on your calendar. They need 3,265 people to attend. You want to talk about a tsunami of positive force, a potluck in Meadville with over 3,000. That's what I'm talking about. In Williamsport, as they collected stories connected with like Fleming College, and students helped to videotape those stories. And that became the source for a website where people could go and see all these stories, and became a full-length documentary about the positive force in the community. Hundreds of people came out for the premiere. I believe you were there. It was pretty exciting. And so from there, folks moved beyond those kinds of events to take action in their communities. Here's one example in Williamsport. As the stories were being collected, it surfaced very close to Section 8 housing in downtown Williamsport, that the local Weiss down the street was going to close. And the community just came together to do something about it, because in that housing area, there were a lot of seniors and there were a lot of people that did not have cars. They weren't going to be able to drive across town to the other grocery store, and they needed a source of food, and people came together to make change. And I know that Pam's going to talk about what happened here in Carlisle as well. It's that placekeeping that's really essential to it all. And to really identify what is of value. In Meadville, immediately, folks said, we need a place for youth to gather. And people came together and they created a lounge, a space for young people to come together. Action starts immediately, and that's what's incredible. You know how planning processes take 2 years. What about a process that activates people to get involved and to start taking action from the start? But, you know, I know that planners, because I've been involved in this process, say, oh, that's that soft stuff. That's the gooey stuff. What are the outcomes? There are real outcomes. And it's not only the space in Meadville for young people. It's also the city of Meadville, they won a $25,000 grant from DCD, thank you, to revamp the city's zoning ordinance. That is a process that really directly came from Heart and Soul. So, I mean, we strongly believe that these kinds of outcomes, when you have the input of the community, when you tap in to what we see, that tsunami of positivity and actual civic spirit that is untapped right now in your communities, that's when you can make a huge, huge difference. And it wouldn't happen, and I have to give a shout out to the Cumberland County Historical Society, without incredible partners that bring community members together, because it takes a constellation of leaders to make change. And also, folks like Rick Vilello. I mean, he's I think a living example. Thank you so much for telling that story about how important this work is, to have champions like Rick at DCD for this process. So I hope you have a better sense of what the humanities have to do with planning and how they can play a real role in what you do every day.
Thank you. First, a couple phrases that you mentioned I'm going to throw out to our friends here at the process as well. Uncommon partners, as opposed to what we've traditionally done, which is often referred to as the usual suspects. So think about, who are those uncommon partners that really need to be brought into planning, that it can be more outcome oriented, that it can be more action oriented, results oriented. Value is such a great starting point. And I contrast, and I hope I'm not coming off as cynical today, but I contrast with some things we've done historically, like hold public meetings and ask people what's wrong with the community. What are the problems? What are the issues? There's a place for that. But why not really connect with people in terms of what's important to them? That is it. I'll use an overused phrase. That's a needed paradigm shift. And your phrase tsunami of positivity, I'd ask everyone to write that on their palm and not wash their hands for a week or two. And think about how we can start. A tsunami of positivity. I'll let you know one tsunami that's coming at us, and I'm part of it. I'm a baby boomer. I have 5 kids. They're all millennials. I have 3 sons-in-law. They're all millennials. All of us don't want to live in my neighborhood. I won't tell you what my neighborhood is to protect it. But it's, when I was coming of age, it's where we all wanted to live. We didn't want connection to anything. And there's a place, and there'll be a lot of people who still want to live in that kind of neighborhood, but the millennials and the baby boomers, in increasing numbers, are going to be looking to be part of community and making connected communities on every level. That's a tsunami that's taking shape. Troy and I and Kirk had that conversation before. They were trying to know what I'm going to be doing in the future, and I'm going to be part of that tsunami. Details to come. A lot of good. I mean, they're putting already, Laurie, they're putting out some things here that really do speak to these challenging solutions we want not only define, but do something about. Pam, you're the home team. You're the home team, and you're wearing the white uniform as the home team usually does. I'm a baseball fan, so gray would have been out of sorts today. That's the way. Pamela still has been a member of the Greater Carlisle Heart and Souls leadership team since its inception in 2016. She has worked in the Mount Holly Springs community to bring awareness to the cultural resources in the community that have been lost or on the verge of being lost, and we can't allow that to happen. She served a term as a member of the Borough Council for Mount Holly Springs and is currently active with the Mount Tabor AMA Zion Church and Cemetery Preservation Project, an initiative that grew from the Heart and Soul process. Please welcome someone close to home, Pamela Still.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to start with a short video. thank you for letting me indulge you with this video of Mount Holly's past. And I want to apologize. I was just assistant manager for Kmart in 3 states. I work for Kraft Foods. I'm not an executive director of anything. I was just a volunteer. I was just a person who happened to buy a beautiful stone house in a town. And as I retired, I became extremely concerned about the condition of the town. And I shake because of a neck injury. I love that I'm talking to you, but I'm going to have to refer to my notes so that I get the information out. But living in Mount Holly Springs for the past 18 years, I was well aware that the town was at a breaking point, a tipping point. And the two of the beautiful mansions that were on the video were replaced by a Sheetz and a Dollar General. Rental properties were taking over single-family homes. We're a town of 2,100. We have 628 rental units. In 13 years, 13% of homes were made into, cut up and made into apartments. It was at an alarming rate that the pride of the town was disappearing, and I knew something had to be done. But that was the Mount Holly Springs 5 years ago. Today, I believe the borough is heading in an upward direction. There's flowers, containers lining the street, park benches thanks to Uphold, banners funded by GHAR saying proud past, bright future, line the street. Homeowners are fixing up their properties. I could really relate to what Rick was saying because it's catching. You see ladders, people are painting. They're really doing something about their properties, and you just did not see that. And it's just like a wave going through the town. We have an inspection program now that helps with the health, safety, and welfare of our tenants, and that has just been newly created. We have a new position of a part-time borough manager, which is one of the things that I felt was absolutely necessary when I was on borough council. It met with a lot of resistance, but it has been instrumental in changing Mount Holly. The part-time borough manager is also the police chief, but he has saved the borough an incredible amount of money. We are financially stable, and no matter what the council looks like, and you never know, we have 40 years of bad as good old boys, and I'm glad that Rick was brave enough to say that. I didn't know if there'd be anybody from Mount Holly here. I don't want to be any more tarred and feathered than I already have been, but we are on the right track, and a borough manager will be the stability that we need. So how did this turnaround occur in a few years, and how does Heart and Soul fit in? Well, in 2013, I read about the Greater Carlisle project in the paper. And the article said that they did not want to be an elitist group, that they were welcoming marginal communities to attend. And I thought, boy, that speaks to me. There we are. There, it was the Halloween night, or Halloween parade night in Mount Holly, which you don't miss that parade. Well, I missed that parade to go to that meeting. That's how important I felt it was. The best thing that ever happened. They were having an open meeting, and the public was invited to share ideas or needs with them. And I attended, explained my concerns for Mount Holly Springs, and I asked them for help. And a planner just happened to walk in. She was at Vinson College, working as a part-time professor, and she just sort of floated in at the last minute. It's the only way I can describe it. And she said, I'll help. And Dickinson College Greater Carlisle project representative offered to facilitate a public meeting, and I was handed a field guide by the GCP lead early on in this process. And he said he thought it would be helpful. because he knew about Mount Holly. And indeed it was. Our initial public meeting was well attended. It was between two huge snowstorms. It was below 0 degrees. And the people just came out. This is a town of 2,100. And they were ready to talk. And the really interesting thing the planner said about our town is that our needs were very basic. We didn't want like a bowling alley out here or a walking trail over there or, you know, individual wants and needs. This was really a community coming together to say we want beautification. We want a streetscape, which we later did a streetscape plan. Wish I'd have brought it, you know, shown it, because I'm so proud of it. But anyway, they wanted rental inspections. They wanted ordinances. They, and the planner had done these in other towns, and she said she really was surprised at how everybody came together on their needs. So, you know, we needed to do this to get back on track. Well, from that point, we planned what we call a community walking audit. And we walked the town to actually identify our needs. And this caught the attention of Kurt Stoner, Cumberland County Planning Commission, and the Redevelopment Authority, and they stepped in. And they said, you know, we want to help. And they helped us create a working document so that we could be well on our way. So meanwhile, through all of this, I got elected to Borough Council through write-ins because I guess they thought they better grab me. And so, we don't get paid. There's this lady that's willing to work hard. So anyway, I organized a revitalization committee and we developed a band of volunteers. I got the best ones sitting right out there, David Toner. And all of this gave me the confidence to pursue another activity that interested me in the Heart and Soul Workbook. And that was storytelling. So with the help of Cumberland County Historical Society, we sought out some of the old timers who could give information you're not going to find in a history book. Blair, I think he just came in. He was very instrumental in helping me out. I just felt we lost so much in Mount Holly that if we can capture these stories for these people that are still alive and have memories of fabulous things that happened in Mount Holly, then we've got to do it now. And just indulge you in a few things. I got a hold of Arlene Chronister. She was one of the first soda jerks at Snyder's drugstore, where everybody gathered. And the men would stop in and Doc would be at his booth, Doc Snyder. And they would talk about the news of the town or the news in the paper. And the kids would go and plan and meet to plan their day. And she got tears in her eyes when she recalled how everyone knew one another. They would sit on the porches and everyone knew you by name as you passed by. And it made you want to live in Mount Holly. It was a sense of place. And then there was Cy Russell, good old Cy. He was one of the first kids to play basketball on a basketball court at the Rice Elementary School when they were building it, because he and the boys decided to sneak through the heating ducts to get into the basketball court. So they were in there playing until the town cop, Tex Dorsinger, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but old Tex got a reputation in Mount Holly. He got those kids out of there. But Cy was around when there was the Holly Park. And Holly Park had a lot of entertainment. They had the Three Stooges, Gene Autry, you know, all those people from that period of time, you know, Tonto the horse. But anyway, is Tonto a horse? Did I say that right? Okay, yeah. Who, Roy Rogers? That it was his, whatever. So I remembers all about it. And so I said, yeah, I picked raspberries for Gene Autry's horse, and I got so much poison ivy doing it. You know, I often wondered, you know, I hope the horse was all right. But anyway, He talked about the Three Stooges, that they were in town, and when they left, they stopped to get gas at the local gas station. I can't think of the name of the gas station, it's a funny name.
With the Gulf State.
Yeah, yeah, I can't remember the name, but anyway, they stopped in, well, the attendant was in there fast asleep. They had to go wake him up, and the pictures are here at the Historical Society of that, of him pumping gas for the Three Stooges. Cy talked about his buddy, Ivan Bretzman, who later became our fire chief. Well, Ivan was driving the fire truck for the very first time, and he hit those railroad tracks at a pretty fast pace. Cy told me he flew off the back of the truck, and he was laying there on the railroad tracks. Well, when we interviewed Ivan Bretzman, he recalled the same story, only he said Cy hit his nose on the bar he was holding onto, and there was blood all over. So, not sure which story is the right story, but it's all on tape. And these priceless stories that vividly describe Mount Holly Springs were done because the Heart and Soul Workbook introduced the idea, and the Cumberland County Historical Society provided us the resources through the Gardner Foundation. And so meanwhile, the Greater Carlisle Project Steering Committee decided to pursue and were awarded the Heart and Soul grant that was funded by the Orton Foundation and the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. And I was part of that process because I was on the steering committee. And I was thrilled that they were going to pursue that. I knew that in my town, we wanted to pursue it, but we did not have the grant funds to match. And so when the Greater Carlisle Project took it up, I was completely thrilled because I already knew the advantages from studying this field guide for a few years. So we hired Dr. Lindsay Varner as the director, and she approached me and asked if she could be involved with some of the storytelling. Well, unfortunately, I had wrapped up that project, but I told her that there was one story that I never got that was nagging at me. It was to interview the 80-some-year-old Gumby sisters to find out what it was like for African Americans to grow up in Mount Holly Springs. Bar none. It was an interview one can only dream of being a part of. With Lindsay and the Orton Foundation and the Pennsylvania Humanities, the project took on a life of its own. The Mount Tabor Church became nominated in 2017 as one of four Pennsylvania at-risk sites. Is now on the Cumberland County Historical Registry. The cemetery has a beautiful black fence surrounding it, constructed by volunteers led by an Eagle Scout. Dickinson College has done ground-penetrating radar to find anomalies, and so much more. Without Heart and Soul, it would have been just one more story that I did. But the Heart and Soul director was very resourceful and made it happen. So my role was to speak about how Heart and Soul benefited Mount Holly Springs. And every municipality has different needs. We definitely were resisting change. It was difficult. It's a good old boy town. We made a lot of progress, and I think we got it over that tipping point. If any of you have been through Mount Holly Springs recently, I hope you noticed a change. We found the Heart and Soul to be an excellent fit, and we even used data collected by Lindsay for a DCNR grant that we wrote and were awarded. And in the last 4 years, and when I was on council, we had about $1.8 million of grants written. Never before. They let me sit in on grant writing at Dickinson College. Never before had we pursued grants. And I just want to say that everybody was good to us. Everywhere we went and asked for help, whether it was South Middleton, or for a support letter, or Planning Commission, Carlisle, every aspect of Carlisle, anybody that we asked for help, they were most welcoming, and I think that has changed as well. I was told by our mayor, our current mayor actually, and he said, "Oh, don't go to Carlisle. They don't care about us. We are only 4 miles away." It's a win-win for everybody. This county is we're the fastest growing county in Pennsylvania. We all have to pull together and help each other, and I'm very grateful for all the help we've got.
Thank you so much. It's precedent, applause before and applause after. You earned it, you've all earned it. On your other palm, where you have not written yet, there's a phrase that Pam mentioned early, and she referred to just a volunteer. Well, here's another tsunami coming at you. We all are so stuck in our silos that we don't realize that there's going to be a tsunami of baby boomers with lots of knowledge, lots of experience, and they just need to be asked to be involved in their community. So it would be interesting in hearing from you later, someone who was in the business world, leader in the business world, what it takes to get people from the business community much involved. You did a great job. I appreciate it. I just want to touch on win-win. I hope you're thinking about win-win, because the whole planning thing is not quite as hard as we think it is. If we just take a different attempt in terms of identifying what are the various wins around our priorities and goals, and how to make a lot of winners. I also very much appreciated talking about these small steps, beautification, things to get things going. We always have to begin somewhere. Small starts are not to be despised. They're very, very, very important. I could go on and on, but I won't. I'm going to introduce Troy Truax to you, our next presenter. Troy's project manager and senior associate at Michael Baker International. He has 22 years of planning experience and holds bachelor's and master's degree from Shippensburg University. He's a native of Fulton County, but has resided in Cumberland County since 1991. My takeaway in terms of knowing Troy, in terms of how this relates to plans to make a difference, to transform, the highest compliment I can pay to Troy is he is a person who cares. So one of the audits we need to do on ourselves and people we engage is, do they really care? Why do they want to be involved? When you are able to involve people who really care about things, things get done. Troy is one of these people who really cares, and I'm glad to know him, and ask you to welcome him. Troy?
Good morning. I do better standing up, so I'd like to fall asleep a little bit too. But I'm very thankful to be here. Lindsay, thanks for inviting me. I always enjoy opportunities to come out to present and get to know new people and see old faces, if you will, younger faces though too. But just a little bit of background. As Keith said, I'm a native of Fulton County, so I grew up in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. Farming community, etc., but had a rich childhood. Got to know the farming community really well beyond Fulton County. My grandfather had an agway business, so I was in 4-H. So the agrarian part of me is still there, etc. And I appreciate that. My introduction to Cumberland County came from my going to Shippensburg, which I followed suit with many of my family members, my dad, my brother, etc. And so being in Cumberland County was almost like being in Fulton County, but I liked the fact that I wasn't that far away from a grocery store. So the trip to church wasn't a half hour or 45 minutes, it was a couple minutes. The trip to the grocery store wasn't a half hour, 45 minutes. So the conveniences that we all enjoy come with all the development, but we have to take in context of how that impacts our communities that we so love and enjoy. Professional experience, most of my time I've been in consulting. Had the chance to work with Keith and Kirk when we were at Gannett, Fleming together. But I cut my teeth in Fulton County in terms of doing planning work. Graduated from Shippensburg. Dad sent me an article and said, hey, they're hiring a new planner for the county. So I applied, fortunately got the job. But that gave me some wonderful introductions to what planning is about. And through the years, working at the different capacities that I've had the opportunity, really has grown my appreciation for planning. But it's always hard to explain to my family, immediate and distant, what do you do for a living? And when I say planning, it's like, So my brother, when he works in business for JLG or now Caterpillar, it's easier for them to comprehend, oh, I get that, that's industrial, that's manufacturing, that's development, etc. But the planning is sometimes really hard to explain, and I think someone mentioned about that's the soft stuff. What's the important stuff? That's really kind of where the seed gets planted to do the construction, where we probably plant the seed for the industries to be in business and set the tone for how they need to play in our sandbox in our communities. So just a little bit more background. When I first got married in Carlisle, my wife is from Carlisle, my in-laws live in Carlisle, in the borough here. I had a chance to be on the zoning hearing board, so that gave me my first introduction to sort of how does bigger communities in terms of urban type settings beyond Fulton County work. Then I moved to South Littleton Township and have been a resident there and also been part of the Planning Commission probably for the last 17 years. I've chaired that board for a number of years and got to see a lot of interesting perspectives that really weigh back into how I conduct myself into helping other communities in their planning efforts. So just a little bit about Michael Baker, not to tout us, but we're beyond just what you might know as transportation. We really get into, I run our planning department at the Harrisburg office, but we like to help communities from the beginning all the way through the end, and I think that planning is very much, we basically feed a lot of work to our other engineering or construction management, but without the planning, a lot of opportunities or a lot of sort of the community perspectives don't get actually added into projects. And I think the PennDOT Connects example is really critical. Too many times, I don't want to bang up engineers, but they're thinking about the real mechanics of how a project gets designed from their engineering design perspective, but too often the planning's input, the community's input is often lost. So if you ever have an opportunity to engage a PennDOT district, etc., in a planning process, a transportation improvement process, now's the opportunity to really enforce or reinforce the community, the Connects process, because that is your opportunity to speak now or forever hold your peace, because upfront and getting input in the design process is so critical. So my whole background has been on municipal planning, comprehensive planning, zoning, land development, etc. So I'm just going to touch upon in Pennsylvania, and everybody probably has an understanding of the municipality's planning code, but there is guidance, there is sort of a process that's in the enabling legislation of the MPC. So this piece of legislation dates all the way back to 1968, and it has grown probably from a couple pages to almost a voluminous document, etc. It's not perfect, but it does provide some semblance of guidance and construct to how we do planning. One of, I think, the flaws in it, if you will, is the fact that it requires counties but not local municipalities to have a comprehensive plan. Fortunately, Cumberland County, with Kirk's leadership, has not only a comprehensive plan, but just one that was just updated. So it's updated on a routine and regular basis. And also, too, it also has affected and been a real direct guidance for the local municipalities in the county to have their own planning process. Under the municipality's planning code, municipal planning commissions are required to be sort of the custodian of comprehensive plans, and that's really important. So that comes back to volunteers being part of that process. I'm a volunteer on the county, on my municipal planning commission effort. We're fortunate enough to have staff, but many communities in Pennsylvania don't have that level of capacity. So they either have to find help, or oftentimes they don't even have a comprehensive plan. So it goes back to the whole process that you have to have a plan, to have a strategy, to know where you're going. And about 2/3 of Pennsylvania municipalities have a planning commission, and about 2/3 have undertaken the task of preparing a comprehensive plan. So, the planning process through DCDs help, Denny Pucco, for example, covers the entire state now. Really sort of I can't say advocate, because that's not a strong enough or a good enough word. He is passionate about the planning process. So if you have an opportunity to engage Denny Pucco, do so. He's very much, and I'll touch upon one of the things that he's trying to advocate, getting out of the sort of the paradigm of the municipality's planning code in terms of it's sort of a square box of how you do planning. I think there's been a lot of interesting advances in the planning process that, just like the heart and soul, is kind of like, let's strip away sort of the way we typically do business and think about the innovative ways to engage communities to make sure that plans are real and relevant to your community's issues and not be a cookie cutter, just picking up, changing a name, and slapping another municipality's name on it. That is a terrible way to do planning. So in Cumberland County, and I don't want to steal Kirk's thunder, but it really, I think, speaks volumes in terms of how strong planning here is in the county. 32 out of the 33 municipalities have a comprehensive plan. Is that still correct, Kirk? We won't name the 33rd, right? Or the 30th.
Newburgh Boroughs.
Okay, so
What we just did.
well, you're working on that, I'm sure, right? And then in terms of zoning, that's really where the rubber hits the road. 30 out of the 33 have it, and also subdivision. That's common. It's been there for a long time. Zoning is kind of a four-letter word, especially when I grew up in Fulton County. It was definitely something you didn't think about or talk about with zoning. So again, planning is really strong with the leadership of the Cumberland County Planning Commission, and Kirk is quite fortunate given the fact that we are the fastest growing county with all the industrial developments occurring, with all the transportation access that we have. We have to have systems in place to basically set the expectation for developers or investors in our community that if you want to do business in our backyard, this is the way that we have to play in the sandbox. And it's not to be sort of offensive to them, but it really provides a level of playing ground or an expectation that this is the way that we do business and this is how we expect to engage and you to be part of our community. So in terms of, again, more examples of planning here in Cumberland County, I won't go deep dive into these, but this was really, I think, indicative of just how much planning is so valued and important in Cumberland County and other communities here in Pennsylvania. Just goes beyond the comprehensive plan. It goes to a land partnerships plan, multi-hazard mitigation plan, rivers conservation plans, etc. So, but the bottom line is a comprehensive plan really should set the foundation. And I think one of the things that I'm observing here today, great initiatives by community volunteers, advocates, making sure that at the end of the day, that it all ties back to a comprehensive planning process. So anytime that you might be actually engaging in specific projects, which is perfect, I would just recommend make sure that that's somehow related or supported by your comprehensive plan, because there is some legal teeth, if you will, in the comprehensive plan that follows along with zoning, subdivision, and land development ordinance updates, etc. So, as a member of the Planning Commission in South Middleton for the last 17 years, whatever the date is, one thing I've always observed, and I think I've actually observed this too in the consulting industry of helping communities in their planning, one thing that grits my teeth more than anything is I'm at the Planning Commission, and then we had a planning process, we talked about it, then you get everybody coming into the meeting that starts to moan and groan and start to all of a sudden have an opinion. That's a reaction to something that they don't want to see in their community. When in fact, they should have been on the front end and been proactive, and I think a lot of examples are shown here. The proactivity is where you get things done. The reactivity is where you sort of hit the, it's the sandpaper effect. It's really gritty, it's rough, it's not smooth at all. So in terms of proactive planning, we're talking about having current and relevant plans and implementation mechanisms, making sure that there's a strategy, capacity, the technical capacity, the financial capacity to actually begin to implement those plans. And this doesn't have to be a big project. The small, low-hanging fruit, as I would call it, that I think was examples here, are really how you start to jumpstart the implementation process and start to identify early win success. And that way you start to realize from a volunteer or elected official, business owner, etc., that, hey, this is really real. This isn't something that's going to sit on the shelf. Established expectations and ability to effectuate positive outcomes, I think is really important. If you don't have that proactive process engagement in the planning process, you're not establishing expectations for your citizens, for your elected officials, but also the economic development side as well. And then also too, it's a great opportunity to engage elected and appointed officials. I think Rick made a great example. He made decisions based upon Lock Haven's downtown master plan. Without that plan, he basically had no 2 feet to stand on, but he could point back to that document and said, here's what you all talked about, this is what we agreed to, in a public setting. So now I have the backbone, if you will, to make a hard decision to raise parking fees. What'd you say, by 5 cents? But rural communities, that's an impact. Every single cent and penny makes a big difference. And an engaged citizenry, making sure that process and the heart and soul process is really a shining example of how you do innovative ways or approaches to engage the public, citizens, and those that really need to be engaged, young and old. And I think Keith's point about millennials is really, really critical to that process. Too oftentimes we get an age group that's my age or older showing up to meetings because they're used to being, non-technical, non-IT. Too many of the millennials today are very much engaged in electronics, social media, etc. So we have to retool our way to engage them, and that includes engaging them in the environments that they're used to and accustomed to. So reactive planning is just the opposite of everything I just talked about. It's the absence of current and relevant plans. There's no expectations of what the vision is for a community's future. No understanding of what your challenges are, what the treasures are in your community. Lack of ability to effectuate positive change because you don't have a planning document or a foundation to go on. Overall disengagement, you're not sort of circling the wagons around a particular issue or issues. And also, too, it's a piecemeal and inconsistent decision-making in terms of the decision-making process. So one example here I wanted to talk about in terms of sort of the new way of doing comprehensive plans. We've been involved in several of these recently, but this is really, I think I give credit back to Denny Pucco, that after 47 years of planning under Pennsylvania's MPC, there's a perception that comprehensive plan follows a standard format and the MPC provides a template. It's time to think differently, and doing so will create a better and more implementable comprehensive plan. So, sort of the 5 basic tenets of comprehensive planning. If you understood the municipality's planning code, it kind of lays out a prescriptive. If you would interpret that way, you need a plan for land use, transportation, and too many times they're siloed, they're not sort of related in any way, shape, or form. So one way that Denny has done a good job is basically saying, listen, that's not a requirement that you follow that process. What you really should do is make sure that your community is focused on planning that's real and relevant on the issues. You organize the plan around the ways that officials and citizens think, devise workable recommendations with actions, provide the capacity for implementation. That's really, really critical. And build community ownership and commitment. So Pam, I'll point her out as an example. There you got a champion right there in the local community that's driving and making it a little bit painful for the elected officials. Oh no, Pam's here at the meeting again. But that's what it takes to actually start to make them uncomfortable, because when it becomes too painful, that's when change starts to really take seed and take hold. So these are really excellent things, 5 basic principles to focus on, and a comprehensive plan doesn't have to look like the typical comprehensive plan. This master plan for the downtown Lock Haven could be your comprehensive plan, if you will. So in some terms of examples of citizens and stakeholder engagement, again, the heart and soul process is excellent, and I think there's a lot of sort of examples that I could point out in what we've been involved in. This process here in the upper right-hand corner was working with PennDOT on the Harrisburg Transportation-Oriented Development Project for the train station surrounding process. I mean, we really engaged in an intense week-long visioning session with the community and residents. So that gave them plenty and ample opportunity to be part of an actual design workshop on the transformation of the Harrisburg train station. But it took PennDOT's leadership, the city of Harrisburg, other stakeholders, business owners, to really make that a successful process. So I think Keith said it best. It's not your consultant or whomever's helping your plan, it's your community's plan. So when we walk away from the table at the end of the day, if you don't take ownership of that plan, then that's where the real hard work begins, is the local ownership of those planning processes. Making sure that, the citizen and stakeholder engagement is absolutely imperative and successful to the planning process. I think someone said it's a process early on what planning is, and if you don't have this part of it and you do it in a vacuum, it's automatically a failure in my book. Because you really haven't, you've done it in a vacuum, you haven't opened it up, and you don't have a really good foundation to start on and make those tough decisions going forward. Must be proactive, must be dynamic approach, think outside the box. And to that point, one size doesn't fit all. It may have worked in community-wide, but you go to the next community, you really have to reevaluate what your engagement process is and needs to be. So I would suggest one size does not fit all. Make sure that it's tailored to each situation. So it could take on a variety of forms, including engaging in local events, engaging the public that way. I think the biggest key is if you just call for a meeting and have people come out to a meeting, oftentimes it's not as successful. But if you engage them, be proactive, engage them in events that they're part of and they want to be part of as part of their family or a sports organization or a community event, that's really a great opportunity to engage them because they're already engaged in a community type setting or a community event, and it's really easy for them to relate of what they like most about their community, what they need help on, what their challenges, etc. So some other techniques, suggestion-wise, is robust promotion to maximize participation, face-to-face meetings, online tools, thoughtful facilitation. Keith's doing a great job here today. So again, a way to successfully engage people to really, it's hard for folks to sit there and try to be proactive, think, and just call out or be part of the process. But if you have someone that's really good about facilitation and engaging, that's a really good success process there to start off. And then focused on engaging all citizens, not just a particular segment. Don't make the meeting easy on yourself. You really have to invite those that you know that are going to be a little bit cantankerous or maybe cause you a little pain in the meeting. But you have to hit those individuals because they are stakeholders too. If you don't address them now, they're going to be more of a challenge down later because you didn't engage them in the planning process. So this is an example from Susquehanna Township. We're helping them right now do their comprehensive plan. So it's a variety of ways that we focus on this. I mean, this was kind of our proposed stakeholder engagement process to have a citizens advisory committee. We had stakeholder meetings and outreach with individuals from the school district, private developers, community groups, recreation groups, the whole host. Online survey, so again, another way to engage folks because schedules are busy, especially this time of year. We had a visioning week just last week where we had an interactive discussion. We had a food truck there as well to make sure people had a good reason to come out. Activities, games for kids because we expect families to bring their children along. We'll have a public open house coming up. And then we dip back into the MPC where we have to actually have a public hearing and go back to the requirements. But making sure that this actually changed when we met with the township officials to say, here, this is our basic approach for you. We designed it for you, but we need to tailor it specifically for you now. So again, this was a basic approach, but again, tailoring it to your community and how that community works. So they might see some things here from the Heart and Soul. The township planner actually suggested what Carlisle did. We did the coasters and went to restaurants, so hats off to Carlisle in that process. We actually engaged in local sports events and had them do a poster and write on there what they liked, what they treasures or challenges to Susquehanna Township. We designed a logo for them that is actually in a real kind of an interesting talking piece because they love the logo. Something so simple has become now a symbol. It's branded their process, if you will. So that's one thing to think about. It's not just a comprehensive plan. You really kind of have to put a brand on it to get people to actually start to understand and take ownership of it. So it reflects the North Mountain, the Susquehanna River, and the community that Susquehanna Township is. So be happy to take questions. I know Keith's going to have a Q&A at the end, but appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Troy. I'll take the microphone. Thanks. Before Kirk Stoner wraps up the remarks, and it looks like we'll have ample time here for that interaction. Quick commercials. Several of the websites, PennDOT Connects has been mentioned. I don't remember the exact website name, but there is a PennDOT Connects website that's out there now and could be of interest to you. Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission, the State Historic Preservation Plan was adopted about a week ago. Go to the PHMC website, and there's a lot there in terms of what local communities could do. My next recommendation is an odd one, and it just ties back to Chester. By show of hands, how many have access to Netflix? About half or more of you. There's a documentary called Sons of Ben, which is really about how just a few people in a community had a vision for a Major League Soccer team in Chester, and how that vision became real, just a few people with a vision. Yes. Sons of Ben. B-E-N, like Ben Franklin. The idea they didn't have a soccer team, so they pretended that they did. They visioned that they did, and then they ultimately did. And it's also the story about community leadership and involvement again. Sons of Ben. Okay. As Kirk wraps us up in terms of the presenters, I ask you to stay until 10 o'clock. We will dismiss on time, and we'll get as much conversation as we can. I will cut a little bit from Kirk's biography in the interest of time. He is the Director of Planning for Cumberland County, where he manages land use, transportation, and environmental planning initiatives in cooperation with the 33 municipal governments that Troy had mentioned. Prior to joining the county in 2003, Kirk worked for the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation. I'm going to skip down just a little bit to let you know that Kirk resides in Boiling Springs. He's an avid golfer. He's also an avid husband, father, and outdoorsman. His degrees are from Shippensburg University, where he has bachelor's and master's degree. You heard earlier today, Cumberland County is the fastest growing county in Pennsylvania. How many counties are in Pennsylvania? 67 counties. And you have, as your executive director of planning in Cumberland County, possibly the best planner in Pennsylvania. And why I say that, he may not agree with me, but I'll say this: he has courage, he's a person of action, he's a person of initiative, he's kind of a no-nonsense individual, and he has grit, and those are characteristics you need. So he may well be the #1 planning director in Pennsylvania, and I'll likely not say that anywhere else in any other meetings about other directors, at least for a few weeks.
Thanks, Keith. For the record, I worked for Keith for a while too, so we do have a personal relationship. And also for the record, I did not pay Troy Truax in his presentation, but thank you for the kind words on our comprehensive plan. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about was our comprehensive plan that Troy just spoke about, that we updated just this past year, and talk about the process we followed, some of the citizen engagement techniques that we used, and things that we learned through that process. So, big question. We're asking a lot of questions tonight, so I'll pose this to everybody. What are you doing tonight? Right? So we're looking at your time. We're looking at citizen engagement. What are you doing? Might be golfing, right? So that's what he said. I'll admit these are pictures of my son. Okay? Why am I using that? Well, you find out later. But also, I was at a conference one time and they said you shouldn't use pictures of other people without permission. I don't buy that. But anyway, we're using pictures of my son here tonight to make a case. This is my son Peyton. This is Eagles Crossing Golf Course just close by. He actually made this shot. 80-yard shot, first time, clean birdie, his first clean birdie playing golf. Okay, so we were there, and I had that on picture. Tate and I like to fish. We live in Boiling Springs. This is Children's Lake. This is one of 15 trout he caught in about 45 minutes. He was sick. We didn't go to Cincinnati to a homeschool conference. We took a walk to the lake. We noticed the lake is loaded with trout. He throws in a few pebbles. We noticed they hit. I said, let's go get the rods. About 15 minutes later, we cleaned them out pretty good. So we had a good day that day. This was 2 weeks ago. Big baseball fans. Worked at Orioles game. So honestly, this night I have to admit, the way the Orioles are playing, I'd rather been in a public meeting that night than an Orioles game. But Tate loves the Orioles. So 17 stretches. That's right. So you look at what do you do? Think about this from your standpoint. What are you doing? What are you doing tonight? How many of you want to go to a public meeting? Right? Is that what you want to do with your time? This is a picture from our public engagement back in 2013. Some of you may know the gentleman I'm sitting there talking to. You can see it was a lackluster response on engagement. Right? So some meetings are entertaining. I have to say, when you go to meetings that are hot topics, they are entertaining. Unless you're the guy that's standing up there giving the presentation, or Pam well knows if you're sitting up there at the table, sometimes you can be the one that's the victim of some abuse. In this picture, I really like these little girls. Look at that. Where would they rather be? Would they rather be, golfing, fishing, at a baseball game? Or would they rather be here watching this guy get really wound up? Hopefully that's not their dad or their grandpa setting a horrible example. I also think they look like the Olsen twins. This was a recent one in Cumberland County. Maybe you want to go to another meeting. So those of you that read the Sentinel, this is from the Sentinel. This is in Penn Township. Recently had an issue with wells, and injection wells. injection wells for disposal of stormwater. So when you hear that, it makes you think, okay, an injection well into where? Well, the wells where people have their water system. So if you look at the faces in this crowd, this is a no-nonsense group, and they don't look happy, okay? So again, it's about choices. So when we look at our county comprehensive plan, we had to figure out of our 250,000 residences, what do they think, right? How do we get them engaged in our comprehensive planning process? So what I'm not going to do today is go over the comprehensive plan and talk about everything that we did in it. Rather, I want to talk a little bit about the engagement methods and what we got out of it. So the engagement methods, we used stakeholder meetings. We met with the chambers of commerce. We met with the business associations. We met with the Rotary clubs, going out and doing one-on-ones. We went to them. We didn't ask them to come to us. We went out to them. Listen to what they had to say. We had day-long public open houses. So our staff, we opened that office at 7 to 7:30, which if you're familiar with county offices, that's kind of unheard of, right? You know, 8 to 4:30, the world starts and ends at 8, ends at 4:30. So we opened it at 7:30, 7:30, and we stayed open to 7 at night, so that if someone wanted to come out, they could. Posted all our documents online. We had a huge social media push through Facebook and Twitter. We also did a survey. That's the one element I do want to focus a little more on today. And we also worked the media pretty well. We looked at TV. We had TV, radio, and print media coverage of everything we've done. So we really worked through that process. The survey was kind of the foundation of what we did. So we distributed 6,200 postcard surveys. We got about 400 responses out, which really makes that when you look at the statistics, you get into the kind of statistics of what's statistically valid for the county. It is a statistically valid sample. It's a random sample, so we can draw some conclusions from that. We also had a convenient sample where anyone could take the survey. So we put that out, worked over social media, ABC 27. Either it was a slow news week or I don't know, but they covered it twice for us. And every time they covered it, you could see an increase in our responses. We worked with the Shippensburg University Center for Land Use. They asked me at the start, what's the goal for the survey? Admittedly, in my mind, well, you know, if we get 1,000, that would be great. But being funny, I said, I want to break the internet. I want to break the internet with this survey. Well, the first showing on ABC 27, we almost broke their servers because we could see the rate of response that they weren't prepared for. So again, it's getting that message out there and getting it to the people of time that they can respond. We asked a question as part of the survey. This is the only survey result that I'll share. What's the best way for Cumberland County to communicate with you? Again, we had nearly 3,000 responses to our survey. So you look at this, you see the different medias, random samples of this postcard we sent out, convenient samples to anybody. You can see some similarities. But I think that the most interesting statistic here is, let's look at the low. In-person public meeting. With that statistic in mind, you look at our local governments now, what is the primary method that they're using to try and get to their residents? Public meetings. So when you look at breaking the complaint cycle, how do we break that? We have to do something new. We can't stick with the tried and really not true method of public engagement, which is, you know, working through public meetings. You can see here, email for us was huge, social media as well. But we did all of that. So we looked at the communication method, we did them all, so that there was a variety. So we'll cut to the chase. What did we learn? So first is, everyone is busy and you're competing for their valued time. So each one of those pictures I showed you of my son, I use that for a reason. Because each one of those is a memory that I can talk about, that I'm very familiar with what we did that evening. My options, and the options of everybody else that you may be working with, is that. You know, family time, doing something you like, recreation time, or coming to a public meeting. And you can see some of the annex that go on at public meetings. So you're competing for that valued time. So you have to make the most of that time. And you have to figure out that not everybody's going to want to come to a public meeting. So if they're not coming out, how do we get them out? What are some of the methods that we can use to get them out? The second one is that everyone has an opinion, right? Everyone has an opinion. You ask them, they'll tell you. But I think the issue at hand will dictate how they give you that opinion. So, for instance, the example of Penn Township and the gravity wells and the injection wells. That's an issue that hits directly at their property, it hits directly at their livelihood and their quality of life. When they turn on the faucet and they see that the water is brown and they can't drink it, that's a huge impact. They're going to come out to the meeting, which they did. There was several of those meetings. They last a long time. People are angry. They're going to come out. But for a comprehensive plan, Is that something that has an immediate impact on someone? No. And I think Troy, the point that Troy was making with some of the issues he sees at the Planning Commission, people will come out to meetings and complain about something. They had adequate opportunity to comment on it. Maybe they didn't take advantage of it. Because it was not immediate, it wasn't imminent, and it didn't have a direct impact on that. So you have to kind of look at this and say, all right, on some of these issues, how important is it to residents? If it's really important, you can have a public meeting, they'll come out, great, do that. If not, if it's something that, it's marginal, maybe like a comprehensive plan, some other initiatives, you have to meet everybody where they're at. So where are they at? They're out at the baseball games. They're out at the trout, at the lake fishing. Maybe they're on their golf course. So you have to meet them where they're at. Give them the opportunity to participate where they're at. So it's not taking an entire evening. It's not going to a meeting. One thing that frustrates me is you go to a meeting and you have to sit through 2 hours of other people talking, whether it be a presentation from the elected officials or someone else that has a strong opinion that won't be quiet. So you have to sit there as a resident waiting for your opportunity to give your input. Make sure that when you have public engagement opportunities that you give them adequate input. You want to listen to them so they can come in, put it up and go. Give their input and go. Or if you're going to do it online, give your input and you don't have to go to a public meeting at all. So think about that as, how are we going to get their opinions and how do they share it? Is it important enough for a public meeting? If not, what's another technique that may work? And finally, if I were to redo this slide, I would underscore listen as well. So ask, listen, and respond. So if you're doing a public meeting, you want input. So I think it's extremely important that you listen. So I've seen so many public meetings where it's somebody talking. One most recently, I'll call that the Cumberland Valley School District. Okay, so there's this project they're working on eminent domain. So they recently had a public input session. It was interesting how long they talked and how they dictated what the fact and opinion was versus listening to the people that came there to give their input. So that was a perfect example of, we're involved in that. We've submitted preliminary objections from the county level on that issue. So if you're having a town hall meeting to listen to people, why would you have your folks up there to speak for forever and then dictate what's fact and opinion up front and then ask for someone's opinion afterwards? So think about that as you listen. Sometimes it's good for public meetings, just listen. Write it down what people are saying. And most importantly, respond. So with our comprehensive plan, with the input we gave, you can see that the resident input is directly reflected then in our goals, objectives, and strategies. So what they said we're trying to do. Can we do everything? Absolutely not. And you'll have to say no. Everyone knows that. You're going to have to say no at some point. But I think if you respond and say, we heard what you said, but this is the direction we're moving ahead. I think that's very important. Listen and respond, please. This is a word cloud from our comprehensive plan. This was the open-ended comments where we took where people were commenting generally about the process and what's going on. You can see the biggest term here. Word cloud, if you're not familiar with the word cloud, it takes words that were mentioned, and the larger the word, the more times it was mentioned. So in this case, you can see thank was the biggest word that was mentioned for people that chose to make open-ended comments about the planning process. So it tells you a story. Is everybody happy with our comprehensive plan? No. I mean, some people have called in, said they're not happy. In the survey itself, it was blatantly apparent that some people weren't happy. But at the end of the day, they were saying thank you for the input. Thank you for the opportunity to provide that input. So as municipal governments, or county governments, or nonprofits, if you're looking for public input, I think we have to keep that in mind. Since we're using quotes, Keith, I'll use one. Admittedly, it's from Bill Cosby, so not the best example, but still, it was. I have the quote hanging in my office, but I blacked out his name. I just put I couldn't look at the name anymore. But his quote goes something like this: "I don't know what the recipe for success is, but I know the recipe for failure is trying to make everyone happy." That's right. So as you look through the planning process, we're not going to make everybody happy, but I think the key point is at least asking for their input, trying to meet them where they're at, and make sure they have the opportunity to give that input, and then listen to them, and then respond in some fashion. So I think with our county comprehensive plan, where we're successful in doing that, that's why I come to work every day. I love working with all of our residents, all of our communities. And I think if you're in public service and you don't like that, it might be time to find a new job. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Kirk. The time is going by so quickly. I'd like to keep that up. I think the thank and the word cloud would apply to our panel as well. Really good job. I wanted to do something a little more expansive in terms of the interaction, but what I'll say is, when you look at your list of challenges and solutions, one at a time, why don't you identify either one of your solutions or one of the challenges? If you identify a solution, we just want to hear that. If it's a challenge, maybe it's something we'll discuss with the panel. And who would like to lead us off? And I probably can guess whom it might be. No, I really can't. I just have some generalized ideas. Yes, and your name is?
Dept Winston.
Okay.
And the first one I had on my list for a challenge was inclusion. How do we get people who are not part of our processes in traditional ways involved in those processes? Because we need those voices. And I don't know what the solution is.
Okay. I wish we had 2 hours to speak to it. Anybody from the panel or anyone else in the room want to talk about inclusion? Pam?
Well, I'm just going to say one word, or one sentence. Find the people in the neighborhood whom you can work through to affect change.
I'm going to add something else. It's a word I didn't hear enough today, and I want to add it in the limits of time. Leadership. The idea of finding leaders in every sector and relying on a more flat, a decentralized approach to have those leaders, be they in the educational community, the faith-based community, business, have them do the engagement within their spheres of influence. Next, and thank you. And tell us who you are, too, please.
Sophronia Perry. I put under solutions, and that would go along with what you were saying about inclusion, is to engage the community through events.
Engaging the community through events. Kirk left us a very strong impression here today, and your t-shirts will be mailed to you within the next week or two. On the one side of the t-shirt, it's going to say public meetings, and on the back of the t-shirt will be a dinosaur. We need to engage people to places they want to be. Very, very good. Next, and feel free to participate. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine instead of a room with all these wonderful portraits, we're having pizza, beer, or soda, whatever your beverage of choice is. What would you say if we're sitting around having pizza? This table, I'll look for some challenges or solutions. That's a tremendous list. Share several.
My name's Katie Hess. I direct South Mountain Partnership. Okay, challenges. Attitude, apathy, culture. I think that this manifests in several ways in this county. Some of it is just culturally we don't participate. The everyday person doesn't participate in the planning process because who knows why, it's a several generation old tendency. But then also with the conventional planning process, they don't feel heard anyhow, so it's just a self-perpetuating cycle. And then we just spoke about how a solution for that, and that is to go where people already are, engage them, ask them, and they're very thankful for having the opportunity. I think it's a relatively simple solution. But then also, we have to go places where we may not be comfortable going, into communities that we may not know very well to find those leaders that someone just spoke about. Yeah, I'll leave it.
Feel free to add another one or two, Katie. We appreciate your leadership. Give us one or two more. Lindsay, will I have permission to post those on that wall?
Okay.
Another one that I mentioned was decisions are based on money, not on what is right and what benefits the most people for the longest amount of time. I think that a solution is definitely talking about what is working and what is valuable rather than just collecting the negative and capitalizing on those things through value-based development, nature, natural asset development, things like that.
Isn't it a lot easier to build on what's working rather than to fix what's broken?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Who would like to go next? And this comes from a lot of different angles.
Christine Musser. I'm just a resident of Silver Spring Township. But one of the things with Cumberland County being the fastest growing county and then Silver Spring being the fastest growing township, a lot of the incoming residents are either from outside the area or from another country. So how the challenge is trying to educate those from another culture into the new culture, or into the culture of the area.
There's certainly a lot of groups, nonprofits doing English as a second language, churches, etc., that can be partners in that. Yeah, just keep passing the microphone around.
I'm Jessica Trimble from the Center for Local Government Services. I said a challenge was probably a lack of administrative capacity, time to think about these kind of things when you're tied up dealing with being reactive to problem solving. And I mean, I had a long list of solutions. I guess with that one, we've already talked about it, developing those informal leaders in the community.
Yes.
And that's a big part of the Heart and Soul agenda, right, is to kind of tap into the informal leaders and channel those louder voices and also the quieter voices that might develop into a good informal leadership. So you have other people to share those responsibilities with.
My name is Sue Mills, and I live in Mechanicsburg. I know people from Holly. Mine was preserving protected land, farmland, and open spaces. And my idea to identify people is because of townships and municipalities, everybody has their own little governmental area. And anyway, to identify those people who would like open spaces and have a discussion about zoning rules for development and preservation. Have a plan to discuss to bring townships meetings, bring lots of people, like the McCormick Farm, that was a beauty. To protect open space such as economics, plans for public areas, for recreation, protection of historic things, protection of the environment. Because in my mind, it's unregulated development in this area. Great big like the trucking industries that pollute, and just commercial properties that are competitive with like small towns, and just things like, I know this is kind of stuff from the past, but I lived here all my life, and I like a lot of that stuff, and I see it disappear.
We go to our panel, and we'll go back to the audience.
One tip I'd like to give, and it made a difference during my time as mayor. Don't just show up at a public meeting or a local municipal meeting when you're mad about something. If you can get to know your elected officials, like read the local paper, know what's going on, and if there's a community picnic or something, show up. Get to know the name of your township supervisors, your borough council, your mayor, your state representative, your state senator, when you're not asking for something. And get to know them so that they know your name when they see you. And be able to have a conversation so that when you want to have a discussion, they're receptive to having a discussion because they already know your name. They're approachable. And even if they are part of the Good Old Boy Network, they're going to be more willing to listen if they've had good interactions with you before you're upset about something.
Relationship building is so important. Let's play a little game, and we'll start with you, hopefully. I used this game with my kids growing up. 10 solutions in 5 minutes. So hopefully you have a solution. If not, you can go, after you, it'll be solutions.
Sure. The one thing I just wanted to play upon was what Rick Vilello said. I'm Ted Martin, I'm the DCD Regional Director. This is why he's the Deputy Secretary, but I think he hit on it exactly. Frankly, I think the one word that people mention that I love is grit. Everyone in America thinks like Mr. Smith goes to Washington, you make one big impassioned speech at a meeting and everything gets done and everyone goes home and you throw the confetti and it's done. This is a slow process, a slow persistent process with people, and you have to be there again and again and again, so you have to sustain that over time. That's how you pass ordinances, that's how you make a change. And people need to understand that, I think, from the get-go, that this is a process, and getting to know people makes all the difference. And not yelling at them and pointing like that person giving the terrible example of the little girl.
Grit is a great four-letter word. Speaking of four-letter words, if you do watch Sons of Ben, you may not want to have kids in the room. I don't want you to have to call. The language isn't great. So 10 solutions in 5 minutes. Who has some solutions you haven't voiced yet? Some ideas or solutions? Let's get some solutions out there. Laurie?
Short-term wins. People need to see that change is happening. And that's what sustains a movement, because it's exactly what it is. It's a movement. It's a long-term change.
Short-term wins. That's one. Lindsay's keeping count. We need 9 more. But actually, come at this any way you want. I don't want to limit it to the solutions, but I thought it'd be a good way to wrap up today. Other challenges or solutions? Items from the panel?
Oh, I'm just going to say plant the seed. It might not go over the first time, but people will think about it, and just like the borough manager conversation, didn't go over the first time, but they got used to the idea, thought about it then when they got home, and it's a great success.
Can you give us 30 seconds or less of wisdom on how to involve employers or business people? You're a business person? Any perspective there?
Well, I was a manager of blue collar people, so I think, you have to be on their level. I mean, you don't, if you have a master's degree, and they even thought, that I was too, I have a bachelor's, and I think that sometimes they thought I was not approachable. So please, one thing I did learn is be at their level. Know your audience and be at their level.
Thank you. And you pass over to Troy?
I think picking up on what Ted said, but the idea of commitment, it is a long process. Sometimes you can get some low-hanging fruit wins, but the full implementation often involves bigger projects. And those projects out of a planning process might call for, hey, we need to do a deeper dive because this is so important to our community. It might require another planning process to get down to the deep nitty-gritty, but the long-term commitment, and I would say too, financial resources are so hard to come by. So you have to be really creative of how you actually identify financial resources, because at the end of the day, it does take money. So it really becomes, you have to invest some money at some point in time to actually achieve your goals. I mean, you can't just sit back. I think the 5-cent increase is a really good example. You've got to find innovative ways. It might be painful, but that's really true. I'll take an example from Gettysburg. Steinway Avenue, when the visitor center left, I was fortunate enough to be involved in that process, and the one hotel owner said, Troy, we'll never have a business improvement district. You're just wasting your time on this process to educate us. Who was the first person at the end at that process that said, we not only have to have it, we must do it? That was that hotel owner. And he now has, if you know where the Best Western, or excuse me, it's the new hotel on Steinway Avenue. That's the guy. So the other thing is too, they never thought that they could get the money that they did to do the streetscapes. And Jackie White, that owns the Dobbin House, said to me personally, said, Troy, you've got a big project. This is going to be a hard process. I said, Jackie, this is your plan at the end of the day. You're the business owner, one of many. This is really, you have to roll up your sleeves at the end. And so you see the improvements, they're the ones that take the credit for it. So that's where the investment comes in, the dedication and commitment. So it is a long process. You got to stick with it, and you got to see the fruits of your labor.
Thanks, Troy. Anyone else? Final word or two of wisdom?
Can I just piggyback off of what Troy said? I want to piggyback off of what Troy said. A little plug for the South Mountain Mini Grant Program. Every year we have approximately $50,000 from DCNR funding that can be used for municipal planning and ordinance development. So please, as a funding mechanism, always consider our program. Hopefully, in the South Mountain region, most of Cumberland County does lie within the core of our region. And secondly, I wanted to piggyback off of the specific Steinway project, Steinway Street project he referenced. Because of the success of that project, now the Baltimore Street segment in Gettysburg is undergoing a revitalization plan, and that connects downtown Gettysburg to the Steinway project. And we helped to fund a portion of that, and unanimously through the borough for approval. So this is just the very beginning of a big process. They're going to be fundraising $11 million to implement that, but they wouldn't be able to do that without this plan in the beginning.
You get that the next to last word. And tell us who you are.
Ashley Cruzina with Dickinson College, and in the challenge category, I wrote down flame out. And I think what I mean by flame out is particularly a lack of leadership and effective planning for planning. And having been involved in a number of community-based organizations and community-based projects, if you do not have a plan for effective use of your volunteers, accountability, outcomes, low-hanging fruit, all of those things planned at the outset so that the volunteers understand what they're doing and understand the results that they will achieve, you're doing it for pot.
I think I have found my long-lost sister. I didn't know we were related. We could use many more hours. This was excellent, and it's the beginning of the conversation. I would ask you, before you leave, as a matter of conscience, to place all of your post-it notes up there. We'll find a way together to put that together in a very useful document that simply supports the further conversation and turning this into action. You don't have to put your name on those. If you'd like to, you can. But let's fill up that part of the wall with your green notes. And I'd like to thank the panel. You were terrific. I would encourage, I don't know what their schedules are, but I would encourage you to interact with the panel and panel to interact with you on the way out. My last duty is one that I'm so happy to do. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Greater Carlisle Heart and Soul Project, Cumberland County Historical Society, and the Cumberland Conservation Collaborative, and the funders of Greater Carlisle's Heart and Soul Project, Pennsylvania Humanities Council, South Mountain Partnership, and Cumberland County Historical Society. And last of all, Lindsay, you were terrifically helpful in putting this morning together. Everyone in this room owes you a thanks. So, have a great day. Fill those notes up. Lindsay will have someone package those and get them to me or someone else to get them transcribed, and you'll hear from us in the future. Thank you. You know what leaders do? Leaders invest. Thank you for making an investment this morning. Have a great day.